In 1989, a 26-year-old college dropout with no real finance background opened a small brokerage office on Long Island. 7 years later, it would be shut down for one of the biggest stock fraud schemes in American history, and he'd walk away having stolen roughly $200 million from ordinary people who trusted him. His name was Jordan Belfort, and the firm was called Stratton Oakmont. Here's how it actually worked. Stratton Oakmont specialized in penny stocks, cheap shares in tiny, often worthless companies. The firm's brokers would secretly control large portions of a company's stock, then use aggressive, high-pressure phone sales tactics to convince everyday investors to buy in. As demand rose, so did the price. That's the pump. Once the price was inflated enough, Belfort and his inner circle would quietly sell their own shares at the peak. That's the dump. The stock would then collapse, and the investors who'd bought in near the top were left holding shares worth a fraction of what they paid. This wasn't a one-time scam. It was a repeatable system. At its peak, Stratton Oakmont employed more than 1,000 people, all trained in the same aggressive sales script, all working the same basic scheme over and over on dozens of different companies. Here's what nobody talks about. The scale of this wasn't accidental. Belfort built an entire training culture around it, a boiler room sales floor optimized purely for closing calls fast and hard. New brokers were drilled on scripts designed to overcome objections, create urgency, and keep a prospect on the phone until they said yes. By the early 1990s, regulators were already circling. The SEC brought a civil case against the firm in 1994, and Belfort was banned from running a brokerage as part of the settlement. But that didn't stop the operation. He kept influence over the firm from behind the scenes, and the fraud continued. The FBI eventually built a money laundering case alongside the SEC's securities fraud investigation. Belfort's inner circle had been physically smuggling cash out of the country, at one point strapping money to family members' bodies to move it into Swiss bank accounts, trying to keep it out of reach of American regulators. In 1996, Stratton Oakmont was finally expelled from the National Association of Securities Dealers and shut down for good. 3 years later, in 1999, Belfort pleaded guilty to securities, fraud, and money laundering. Here's the part that still surprises people. Despite defrauding more than 1,300 investors and being ordered to pay roughly $110 million in restitution, Belfort served only 22 months in federal prison. He'd agreed to cooperate with investigators, providing information that helped convict other people involved, and that cooperation significantly reduced his sentence. So here's the full picture. A firm built almost entirely on a repeatable fraud scheme grew to over 1,000 employees before regulators caught up with it. Its founder walked away with a fraction of the prison time you might expect for stealing $200 million, and decades later, the bulk of the restitution he owes to his victims still hasn't been paid. After prison, Belfort reinvented himself again, this time as a motivational speaker and sales trainer, teaching many of the same persuasion techniques he once used to defraud investors, just without the illegal stock manipulation attached to them. It's a story that sounds almost too dramatic to be real, but the SEC filings, the court records, and the restitution orders are all public record. The wild version of this story became one of the most famous films of the decade. The real version is the one sitting in federal court documents, still unresolved for the people who lost their money.